The fires below painted the night sky orange and red. Archon Vellana stood at the observation deck of the orbital station, her 4 hands pressed against the cold glass. She watched her world die. The cities that had stood for 3,000 years were burning. The gardens where her children played last spring were ash, the towers of learning, the hospitals, the homes, all reduced to smoke and ruin. The Varathians had come 6 months ago. They came without warning, without negotiation, without mercy. Their ships descended like locusts, and their soldiers poured out like a dark tide. The Kryn people had no defense. They had not fought a war in 3 millennia. Their military existed only for ceremony and rescue operations. Their weapons were in museums. Their soldiers wore dress uniforms and marched in parades. The Varathians were different. They were born for war. Their bodies were covered in thick armor plating. Their claws could tear through steel. Their minds thought only of conquest and consumption. They did not want peace. They did not want treaties. They wanted everything the Kryn had, and they would kill to take it. 12 colonies had already fallen. 12 worlds filled with billions of Kryn were now silent. The distress signals had stopped 3 weeks ago. Vellana knew what that meant. No one survived when the Varathians came. They left nothing behind but empty buildings and bones. She had sent message after message to the Hexarch Alliance. They were the great powers of the galaxy. They had vast fleets and powerful armies. Surely they would help. Surely they would stop this slaughter. But the Alliance had deliberated for weeks. They formed committees. They drafted resolutions. They debated the legal definitions of invasion versus territorial dispute. While they talked, her people died. The final response had come this morning. The Hexarch Alliance would not intervene. They cited non-interference protocols. They mentioned sovereignty and jurisdiction. They offered thoughts and prayers, but no ships, no soldiers, no help. Vellana had wept when she read their response. But tears would not save her people. She needed something else, something desperate. In the station's archive, buried under centuries of forgotten files, she found it. An ancient emergency beacon from the old Galactic Council. The Council had existed 10,000 years ago, before the Hexarch Alliance, before the current age of galactic civilization. They had overseen the old wars, the conflicts that reshaped the galaxy. They had left emergency systems behind before they dissolved. This beacon was one of them. The instructions were simple, but the warnings were dire. The beacon would broadcast on all frequencies, including those reserved for species long extinct. It would reach into the dead zone, the empty regions beyond the galactic rim where nothing lived anymore. The warnings said to use it only in the most desperate circumstances. They said that those who answered might be more dangerous than the threat itself. Vellana looked at the burning world below. She thought of the 12 silent colonies. She thought of the Hexarch Alliance and their comfortable refusal to act. What could be more dangerous than extinction? She activated the beacon. The machine hummed to life with ancient power. Lights flickered across its surface in patterns from a forgotten age. Vellana recorded her message. She did not beg. She did not plead with careful diplomatic language. She simply showed the truth. The burning cities, the refugee camps, the bodies in the streets, the Varathian soldiers hunting her people for sport. She broadcast it all on every frequency the beacon could reach. Then she waited. Days passed. The Varathians continued their advance. They landed more troops. They burned more cities. Vellana watched her home die piece by piece. No response came. The beacon had failed. She had awakened nothing. Her people would die, and the galaxy would forget they ever existed. On the 6th day, something changed. The communications officer, a young Kryn named Salis, rushed to her station. His voice shook with confusion and something else. Fear, perhaps, or hope. He could not tell which. Archon, we have a response. But it's impossible. Vellana moved to his station. On the screen, coordinates blinked. They came from the dead zone, from a region of space marked on all charts as empty. Nothing lived there. Nothing had lived there for 10,000 years. The message was short. It was in a language the computer had to search ancient databases to translate. Earth Standard, the language of humans. But humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. They had vanished 10,000 years ago, leaving behind only ruins and legends. The message read, "Signal received, calculating response, hold position." Villana stared at the words. They were cold, clinical, without emotion, but they were an answer. Someone had heard. Something was coming. In the war room of the Varathian command ship, Hive General Krathix celebrated. His species had conquered another world. The Kryn homeworld would fall within a month. After that, they would take the rest of Kryn space. Then they would move to the next species and the next. The galaxy was theirs for the taking. He did not know about the beacon. He did not know about the message from the dead zone. He did not know that something ancient and terrible had heard the Kryn's cry for help. He did not know that humanity was coming, and humanity had not forgotten how to make war. The Varathian scout ship drifted at the edge of occupied space. Its sensors swept the void, searching for Kryn escape vessels. The crew was bored. This was easy duty. The Kryn had no warships. They had no defenses. Hunting them was barely sport. Then the sensors screamed. 7 massive contacts dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They appeared from nowhere, materializing in perfect formation. The scout's computer struggled to classify them. They were ships, clearly, but the design matched nothing in the database. They were huge, each one the size of a Varathian battle carrier. But their shape was wrong. Sleek. Predatory. Built for violence in a way that made even the Varathian vessels look clumsy. The hull plating was dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Strange markings covered their surfaces, symbols in a language the computer could not identify. No running lights, no identification beacons, just 7 silent leviathans hanging in space like sharks in deep water. The scout captain sent an emergency broadcast to the fleet. Then he hailed the unknown vessels. Standard protocol. Identify yourself. State your purpose. Retreat or be destroyed. The response came instantly, broadcast in every known galactic language simultaneously. 3 words, spoken in a voice that was flat and cold and utterly without mercy. Stand. Down. Now. The scout captain laughed. 7 ships against the Varathian swarm? They had 200 warships in this sector alone. Whoever these fools were, they would learn what it meant to challenge the swarm. He gave the order to attack. 200 Varathian warships emerged from their staging positions. They had been preparing for the final assault on the Kryn homeworld. Now they would destroy these arrogant strangers first. Their formation was a classic swarm tactic. Overwhelming numbers, brutal frontal assault, no mercy and no retreat. The 7 unknown ships did not move. They simply waited. The Varathians opened fire at maximum range. Plasma cannons, missile swarms, kinetic accelerators, everything they had. The void lit up with weapons fire. Enough firepower to crack a planet. Enough to vaporize any known fleet. The 7 ships vanished. Not destroyed. Not blown apart. They simply weren't there anymore. The Varathian weapons hit empty space. The captain screamed confused orders. Sensors searched frantically. Where had they gone? Then the 7 ships reappeared. But now they were scattered throughout the Varathian formation. They had somehow moved through space in an instant, phasing past the attacking fleet like ghosts through walls. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The unknown ships moved like living things. They didn't fight like any military the Varathians had encountered. They fought like a wolf pack. One ship would draw fire while 2 others flanked. They phased in and out of normal space, appearing and disappearing with technology that shouldn't exist. Their weapons were terrible to behold. One ship fired something that looked like a beam of twisted light. When it hit a Varathian cruiser, the ship simply ceased to exist. Not exploded, not destroyed. It was just gone, as if it had been erased from reality itself. Another ship launched projectiles that split apart mid-flight, each fragment tracking a separate target with impossible precision. A third ship fired rounds that tore through armor and then exploded inside the hull, blowing ships apart from within. The Varathian fleet tried to adapt. They tried formation changes, concentrated fire, retreat, and regroup. Nothing worked. The 7 ships anticipated every move. It was as if they could read Varathian tactics before they were executed. The unknown vessels moved 3 steps ahead, always in the perfect position, always striking at the weakest point. Within an hour, 100 Varathian ships were destroyed. The rest tried to flee. The 7 ships hunted them down. Not all of them. Just enough. Just enough to send a message. One Varathian hive ship tried to escape into faster-than-light travel. Before it could, one of the 7 vessels appeared directly above it. The unknown ship was smaller than the hive ship, but somehow more terrifying. Its name was visible on the hull in glowing letters. The translation came through as Vindication. The Vindication fired a single projectile. It punched through the hive ship's armor like paper. Then boarding pods launched. They slammed into the hull and burned through. Armored soldiers poured out. The Varathians inside the hive ship were warriors. They had conquered 20 species. Their claws could tear through steel. Their armor was thick and strong. They outnumbered the boarders 10 to 1. None of it mattered. The armored soldiers moved through the ship like death itself. They were protected by powered armor that made them stronger and faster than any Varathian. They carried weapons that fired rounds capable of punching through bulkheads. But most terrifying was how they fought. They fought with brutal efficiency, with tactics perfected over generations. They fought in teams, covering each other, moving like parts of a single organism. They fought without hesitation, without fear, without mercy. 14 minutes after the boarding began, the Vindication signaled all clear. Every Varathian on the hive ship was dead. Not captured, not subdued, dead. The soldiers had left one alive long enough to broadcast a message, then killed him too. The message reached Archon Vellana aboard her orbital station. It was a transmission request from one of the 7 ships. She accepted with shaking hands. The face that appeared on screen was alien to her but recognizable from ancient historical records. 2 eyes forward-facing like a predator's. Skin instead of scales or fur. Hair on top of the head. Human. An actual human. The woman on screen wore a military uniform. Her expression was cold and professional. When she spoke, her voice was steady and hard. Archon Vellana, I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We received your distress signal. We are en route to your position. Estimate arrival in 6 hours. Prepare your people for evacuation and military coordination. The Varathians will be removed from your space. This is not a negotiation. Vellana found her voice. You're human. But humans are extinct. You've been gone for 10,000 years. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. We were never extinct. We left, now we're back. We heard you calling. We're coming. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations tracked the aftermath. The great powers of the Hexarch Alliance watched the recordings in shocked silence. 7 human ships had destroyed a Varathian battle fleet. Humans, the species that vanished 10,000 years ago, had returned. And they had returned as something terrifying. In the throne chamber of the Varathian Empress, the news arrived. She listened to the reports of the massacre. Then she rose from her throne and declared total war on the humans. She would mobilize every ship, every soldier, every weapon the swarm possessed. She would crush these ghosts from the past. She did not understand what she had just done. She had just declared war on the deadliest species the galaxy had ever known. The historical archives of the Hexarch Alliance contained records going back 12,000 years. Deep in those archives, buried under layers of classified data, were files about humanity. Most species thought humans were extinct. The files told a different story. 10,000 years ago, humanity had been known. They had been feared. They had fought in wars that still haunted galactic memory. The records showed battles where human soldiers held impossible positions. Campaigns where human fleets turned certain defeat into unlikely victory. Strategies that were studied in military academies for generations. But the records also showed something else. They showed humans who were tired. Humans who looked at what they had become and were horrified. They were good at war, too good, and it frightened them. After the last great conflict ended, humanity made a choice. They would leave. They would seal themselves beyond the galactic rim, in the empty spaces where nothing lived. They would try to evolve past their violent nature. They left behind only emergency beacons, a promise that if the galaxy truly needed them, if genocide threatened and no one else would act, they would return. Then they disappeared into the dead zone. The galaxy breathed easier without them. 10,000 years passed. Everyone assumed the humans had died out there in the dark. Everyone was wrong. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of the flagship Absolute Zero. Around her, holographic displays showed the tactical situation. Varathian-occupied Kryn worlds lit up in red. Human fleet positions glowed blue. The Kryn homeworld pulsed at the center, still holding but barely. "Status report," she ordered. Commander Torres looked up from his station. "Third Fleet has secured the Kelmar system. Varathian forces retreated after minimal engagement. Fourth Fleet is moving on the Raxus colony. Fifth and Sixth are running liberation operations on the outer worlds. We've freed 4 colonies in the last week," Chen nodded. The operations were proceeding faster than projected. The Varathians were dangerous fighters, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity before. They had never faced an enemy that had spent 10,000 years preparing for war. Because that's what humanity had done in exile. They had left to find peace, to become something better. But peace was impossible for them. Their nature wouldn't allow it. Without external threats, they turned inward. They studied war. They perfected it. They built generation ships that were mobile fortresses. They trained soldiers in gravity chambers and hostile environments. They developed weapons that pushed the boundaries of physics itself. They had prepared for a war that never came. Until now. "What are our rules of engagement?" Torres asked. Chen's expression hardened. "Every Varathian military unit gets 1 chance. Full retreat from all Kryn space within 24 hours or face total response. Any unit that refuses, any ship that fires on our forces or Kryn civilians is eliminated. No prisoners, no negotiations. Some might call that extreme. Some might call what the Varathians did to 12 colonies genocide." Chen replied coldly. "We're not here to be fair. We're here to stop a slaughter." The liberation of the colony worlds went like clockwork. Human forces arrived in orbit. They broadcast their ultimatum. Smart Varathian commanders retreated immediately, the ones who didn't found out why humanity was feared. On the colony of Salus IV, a Varathian occupation force chose to fight. They had hostages, thousands of Kryn civilians held in camps. They thought this would protect them. They were wrong. The human assault force was called the Revenants. They were special operations, enhanced soldiers designed for impossible missions. Their armor was lighter than regular infantry, but far more advanced. They could turn invisible using light-bending technology. They could hack enemy systems with thought commands. They moved with inhuman speed and precision. The Revenants infiltrated the camp at night. They disabled security systems. They marked every Varathian soldier with targeting data. Then at exactly midnight they struck. The battle lasted 6 minutes. Every Varathian soldier was eliminated. Not one hostage was harmed. The Revenants moved like shadows, like monsters from nightmare. The Varathian commander never even saw the soldier who killed him. Word spread fast. The humans were not saviors. They were not peacekeepers. They were weapons, and they had been aimed at the Varathian swarm. In the archive libraries, a Hexarch researcher found something that made his blood run cold. It was a recording from the old wars 10,000 years ago. A Varathian commander from that era had fought against humans. He had left a warning in the military database. The recording showed an old Varathian, scarred and missing 2 limbs. His voice shook as he spoke. "I fought the humans at the Battle of Kree Station. My fleet outnumbered them 5 to 1. We should have won easily. But humans don't fight like other species. They don't follow the predictable patterns. They adapt. They improvise. They turn your strengths against you. We thought we had them trapped. Instead, they turned our trap into their killing ground. Of my 5 fleets, only my ship escaped." The old commander leaned closer to the camera. "If you ever encounter humans in battle, remember this: never corner them. Never assume they are beaten. Humans don't surrender. They don't give up. They just get creative. And when humans get creative with violence, planets burn." The recording ended with a final warning. "The humans left our space voluntarily. They could have conquered us all. Be grateful they chose mercy, and pray they never come back." But now they had come back. The Hexarch Alliance sent messages to Admiral Chen. They demanded explanations. They ordered humanity to stand down. They threatened sanctions and military action. They were used to being the ultimate authority in the galaxy. Chen's response was brief and broadcast on all channels so everyone could hear. "We came because the Kryn asked for help. We came because genocide was happening and you did nothing. You formed committees while children died. You debated jurisdiction while colonies burned. You offered thoughts and prayers, but no action. We will remove the Varathian threat from Kryn space. After that, we will discuss the galaxy's future. If you interfere, we will remember that you're the ones who left innocent people to die. Choose your next actions carefully. The Hexarch Alliance fell silent. They had fleets and armies, but they had just watched 7 human ships destroy 200 Varathian warships. They weren't sure they wanted to test humanity's capabilities. On the Kryn homeworld, Valana met with human military advisors. They were teaching her people how to fight, how to defend themselves, how to ensure this never happened again. One advisor, a sergeant named Williams, demonstrated a rifle to a group of young Kryn volunteers. This weapon can punch through Varathian armor at 500 meters. But the weapon isn't what makes you dangerous. Your mind is. Your willingness to defend your home is. We're going to teach you how to turn that willingness into strength. A young Kryn raised his hand. Sergeant, you've been gone for 10,000 years. Why did you come back? Williams looked at the young Kryn for a long moment. Because someone needed to. Because we heard people crying for help and no one was coming. Because we're good at one thing, and sometimes the galaxy needs that one thing. We came back because you called. And when we leave, you'll be able to defend yourselves. That's the promise. Valana watched the training from a distance. She had awakened something terrible and powerful. Something that killed with cold efficiency, but something that had also crossed the galaxy to answer a cry for help. She wondered if the rest of the galaxy was ready for humanity's return. She suspected they weren't. The ultimatum reached the Varathian Empress at dawn. It was broadcast on every channel, transmitted directly to her throne room in a way that bypassed all security. The humans wanted her to understand that her defenses meant nothing to them. Admiral Chen's face filled the view screen. Her expression was carved from ice. Varathian Empress, you have 72 hours. Withdraw all military forces from Kryn space. Return all stolen resources and technology. Pay reparations to the Kryn people for damages. Comply with these terms and your species continues to exist. Refuse and we will implement species-level consequences. This is your only warning. The Empress stared at the screen. Species-level consequences. The humans were threatening extinction. Her advisors urged caution. The humans had proven their military superiority. They had destroyed every force sent against them. Perhaps negotiation was wise, but the Empress had built her rule on strength. She had conquered 20 species. She had crushed every enemy the swarm had faced. To surrender to these humans, to admit weakness, would destroy her authority. Her pride would not allow it, she gave the order. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon the Varathian swarm possessed. They would gather at Solanas Prime, the Kryn homeworld. They would crush the human fleet. They would show the galaxy that the Varathian swarm bowed to no one. 10,000 Varathian warships began moving toward Kryn space. It was the largest military mobilization in 1,000 years. Surely no force could stand against such numbers. The human fleet numbered 73 ships. Archon Valana watched the Varathian armada approach on long-range sensors. The numbers made her sick. 10,000 ships. How could 73 ships, even human ships, stand against that? Admiral Chen stood beside her on the command deck. The human showed no concern. Archon, I need you to evacuate all civilians from the planet's surface. Move them to the far side of your moon. This battle is going to get messy. Admiral, there are 10,000 enemy ships. I can count, Chen replied calmly. We've been preparing for this fight for a very long time. Trust me. The evacuation took 48 hours. Kryn civilians loaded onto transport ships, many of them piloted by Kryn volunteers who had trained with the humans. They had learned fast. Not just piloting, but tactics, weapons, combat doctrine. They wouldn't win this battle, but they would fight alongside those who could. When the Varathian armada arrived, the space around Solanas Prime became a forest of metal, 10,000 ships in formation blotting out the stars. The Varathian Empress herself commanded from the flagship, determined to witness the humans' destruction personally. The human fleet waited in a loose formation between the armada and the planet. 73 ships against 10,000. The Empress broadcast a message of triumph. Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick. Admiral Chen's response was simple. No, the Varathians opened fire. The void lit up with enough firepower to shatter worlds. Plasma, missiles, kinetic rounds, energy beams, everything they had all at once. A wall of destruction that nothing could survive. The human fleet activated their defensive systems. Shields flared. Point defense systems engaged and something new appeared. The humans had brought weapons kept in storage for 10,000 years. Weapons from the old wars. Weapons so terrible they had never been used since. Reality warping generators created pockets of twisted space. Vorathian weapons entered these pockets and simply vanished, shunted into other dimensions. Singularity cannons opened tiny black holes that lasted only seconds, but swallowed dozens of ships in their brief existence. Molecular disruptors made armor and hulls simply fall apart at the atomic level. And then there were the biological weapons. Humanity had studied Vorathian genetics. They had built viruses, nanomachines, genetic-specific toxins. They deployed them through the battlefield in invisible clouds. Vorathian soldiers on breached ships began dying, their own biology turning against them. The human ships moved through the chaos like dancers in a carefully rehearsed performance. They had run this simulation 1,000 times over 10,000 years. Every ship knew its role. Every captain executed their orders with perfect timing. They fought not as 73 separate vessels, but as one massive, coordinated weapon. The Kryn volunteers flew alongside them. They were clumsy compared to the humans, their ships less advanced, their tactics less refined, but they fought with desperate courage. Every Vorathian ship they damaged, every missile they intercepted, was one less threat to their homeworld. The battle lasted 19 hours. At the end, the Vorathian armada was broken. 9,000 ships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors fled in panic, all formation and discipline abandoned. The Empress's flagship tried to escape into faster-than-light travel. The Vindication appeared in front of it. Admiral Chen herself led the boarding action. She wanted the Empress to see a human face before this ended. They found the Empress in her throne room, surrounded by her royal guard. Chen walked through the guards like they were children. Her armor absorbed their attacks. Her weapon dropped them one by one. Finally, she stood before the Empress. "You were warned," Chen said. "You chose pride over survival," the Empress hissed in defiance. "You cannot win. The swarm is eternal. We will return. We will consume everything." Chen's expression was colder than space. "No, you won't, because we're going to your homeworld next. Not to conquer it. Not to occupy it. Just to deliver a message you'll never forget." The human fleet appeared in orbit over Vorathian Prime 6 hours later. The home system tried to mount a defense. The humans swept them aside like dust. Then Admiral Chen broadcast her message to every Vorathian on the planet. "Your leaders chose war. Your armies committed genocide. Your fleets are destroyed. You have one chance for survival. Leave this region of space. All territories within 200 light-years of Kryn space are now forbidden to you. Never return. Break this exile and we will return. Next time we won't stop until your species is extinct. This is your only mercy." To prove their point, the human fleet demonstrated their weapons. They targeted uninhabited regions of the planet. Mountains were vaporized. Oceans boiled. Atmospheric storms were generated that would take years to calm. The humans showed the Vorathians exactly what they were capable of. Then they left. The galaxy watched in horror. Humanity had not just won a war. They had broken a species that had terrorized the Rim for centuries, and they had done it with cold, calculated precision. No unnecessary cruelty, but no mercy for those who refused to submit. Archon Villana found Admiral Chen in the observation deck of the Absolute Zero. The human stared at the stars with tired eyes. "What have we awakened?" Villana asked quietly. Chen was silent for a long moment. "The species the galaxy forgot to fear. We left to escape what we were. We tried to evolve past our violent nature, but you can't evolve past what you are. You can only learn to control it. You reminded us of what we're capable of. I'm not sure if I should thank you or apologize. The Hexarch Alliance is calling you tyrants. They say you've seized control through military might. They let genocide happen under their watch. They debated while your people died. We're not leaving until that changes." Chen turned to look at Villana. "We didn't come here to rule the galaxy. We came because someone needed help and no one else was coming. But now that we're back, we're going to make sure this never happens again." The Hexarch Alliance received a message from Admiral Chen that night. It contained evidence of dozens of genocides and planetary cleansings that the Alliance had ignored over the last 1,000 years. Species that had cried for help and been given nothing but thoughts and prayers. The humans demanded accountability. The galaxy was about to change. And humanity was just getting started. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Solanus Prime. The galaxy was still adjusting to its new reality. Humanity had returned and nothing would ever be the same. The Varathian swarm had retreated to their core worlds. They were broken, diminished, a shadow of their former power. Their military was in ruins. Their economy had collapsed. Their population lived in fear of the dark sky. Terrified that the humans would return to finish what they started, they became a cautionary tale whispered throughout the galaxy. This is what happens when you make humanity come for you. The Kryn homeworld was being rebuilt. Human engineers worked alongside Kryn workers, raising new cities from the ashes. But there were also human military instructors, training centers, weapons factories. Archon Villana had made a promise to her people. Never again would they be helpless. Never again would they depend on others for their survival. Young Kryn trained in combat academies, learning from humans who had perfected warfare over 10 millennia. They learned tactics, strategy, weapons handling, ship combat. They learned not to start fights, but how to finish them. The Kryn were becoming warriors, and the transformation was both inspiring and sad. Their innocence was gone, burned away by necessity. The Hexarch Alliance was in chaos. The evidence humanity had released could not be ignored. Dozens of genocides documented. Hundreds of pleas for help that were refused. The Alliance had styled itself as the Guardians of Galactic Peace. The records showed they were nothing but comfortable bureaucrats who let atrocities happen as long as it didn't affect their trade routes. Several Alliance members were forcibly removed from power. Not by the humans directly, but by their own people who saw the truth and demanded change. Governments fell. New leaders rose. The old order was crumbling. In its place, humanity established something new. They called it the Accord. It was a galactic council, but one with actual authority. The Accord had one purpose: to respond to genocides and mass atrocities. To be the force that arrived when innocent people called for help. To be the sword that protected the weak. The Accord had strict rules. It would not interfere in politics or trade disputes. It would not take sides in wars between equal powers. But if one species tried to exterminate another, if genocide began and no one else would act, the Accord would respond. With force. With overwhelming, terrifying force. Humanity provided the military backbone of the Accord, but they recruited other species to join. The Kryn sent volunteers. So did species who had suffered under the old Alliance's indifference. The Accord became a promise. Call for help and someone will come. Commit genocide and someone will stop you. Not everyone was happy with this arrangement. Some species saw it as humanity imposing its will on the galaxy. Some feared that the Accord would become as corrupt as the Alliance. And some humans themselves questioned whether they were doing the right thing. Admiral Chen stood before a gathering of human fleet commanders. She looked tired. The war had aged her. The decisions she had made, the death she had ordered, they weighed on her. Some of you have expressed concerns, she began. You worry that we've become the very thing we left the galaxy to escape. That we're using military might to enforce our vision of order. That we're no better than the tyrants we fought against 10,000 years ago. The room was silent. These were humanity's best military minds, and they all shared these doubts. I won't tell you you're wrong to worry, Chen continued. We should always question our actions. The moment we stop questioning is the moment we become monsters. But I'll ask you this. What was the alternative? Let the Kryn die? Let the Varathians continue their conquest? Let the galaxy continue under the Alliance's negligent rule while innocents suffered? Commander Torres stood. Admiral, we came because we were called. But now we're staying. We're building military bases. We're training armies. We're reshaping galactic politics. Where does it end? Chen met his eyes. I don't know. That's the honest answer. We're trying to walk a line between protector and conqueror. Maybe we'll succeed. Maybe we'll fail and become exactly what we fear. But we have to try. Because the alternative is leaving the galaxy the way we found it. And that's unacceptable. On the Kryn homeworld, Archon Villana had a similar conversation with Admiral Chen. They stood in a memorial garden, surrounded by stones bearing the names of those lost to the Varathian invasion. Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice? Villana asked. Calling you back? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Every day. We're not heroes, Archon. We're just the monsters who answer when good people cry out. We came because you asked, but we brought war and death with us. Necessary death maybe, but death nonetheless. Villana touched one of the memorial stones. My daughter's name is on this stone. She died in the first week of the invasion. I activated that beacon for her. For all the children who would never grow up if someone didn't stop the Varathians. Yes, you brought war, but you also brought hope. You showed us that the strong can choose to protect the weak. That power can be used for something other than conquest. Then perhaps the galaxy needs monsters who remember what mercy means, Chen said softly. Velana nodded. Perhaps it does. Across the galaxy, in the ruins of a conquered world, a new species discovered something. It was buried in the wreckage of an old space station, a relic from before the Varathian invasion. An emergency beacon, the same kind that Velana had found. The species was called the Thexian. They were peaceful traders who had been invaded by a different aggressive power. They were losing. Their people were dying. They had sent messages to the Hexarch Alliance and received the same empty promises that the Kryn had gotten. They found instructions with the beacon. They read the warnings. They learned about the Kryn and the humans. They learned about the terrible war that had freed one species, but awakened something ancient and powerful. The Thexian leader held the beacon in his hands and faced a choice. Activate it and risk awakening forces they couldn't control, or let his people die without trying everything possible. He activated it. The message went out into the void. It reached human space. The Accord received it. Admiral Chen read the report and felt a weight settle on her shoulders. Another cry for help. Another species in desperate need. Another war to fight. She gave the orders. 3 fleets would deploy. They would answer the call. Because that's what humanity did now. They answered. Far beyond known space in the dead zone where humanity had hidden for 10,000 years, construction continued. Massive arc ships were being built. Each one was large enough to carry millions. Each one was equipped with weapons that made the current fleet look primitive. Each one was designed for a purpose that only the highest human leadership knew. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, but only a fraction of their true strength. The rest remained hidden, preparing, building, training. Preparing for what, no one would say. But the construction continued day and night, a project that had been underway for millennia. Whatever humanity was preparing for, it was bigger than the Varathian swarm, bigger than the Accord, bigger than anything the current galaxy had seen. In a secure conference room, the leaders of the Accord met. Humans, Kryn, and several other species who had joined the cause. They reviewed requests for help from across the galaxy. There were so many species suffering, so many calls for aid. We can't save everyone, one leader said. We're stretched too thin already. Then we prioritize, Chen replied. We respond to the worst cases first. We train others to defend themselves. We build a network of species who can support each other. We make the galaxy a place where genocide becomes impossible because someone will always respond. That's a beautiful dream, Admiral, another leader said. But can we really achieve it? Chen looked around the table at the representatives of a dozen different species, all united by a common purpose. I don't know. But we're going to try, because the alternative is unacceptable. The meeting ended. The leaders returned to their duties. Fleets deployed to answer new calls for help. Training continued on 100 worlds. The Accord grew stronger. And deep in space, on the edge of the dead zone, a new emergency beacon activated. This one was different. It used frequencies that humanity had left behind as warnings. Frequencies that said, dangerous, do not approach, quarantine zone. The message that came through was garbled, barely coherent. But 3 words were clear. They're coming back. Admiral Chen received the message in the middle of the night. She read it 3 times, her blood running cold. She knew what it meant. Humanity had left the galaxy 10,000 years ago to escape something. Not just their own nature. There had been something else. Something they had fought before the Exodus. Something terrible. And now it was returning. She looked out at the stars and made a decision. The galaxy had called humanity back to fight monsters. They had answered that call. But now a different kind of monster was coming. One that even humanity feared. The galaxy had wanted its defenders back. It was about to learn that humanity had been hiding in the dark for a reason. They had been preparing not just for wars like the Varathian conflict, but for something much worse. The real war was about to begin, and this time the entire galaxy would need to fight together, because what was coming didn't care about politics or borders or species. It only cared about consumption. Humanity had returned as guardians. Now they would become generals in a war for survival itself. The story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning.